Starting off this countdown, we have the boyfriend. So this individual claims to have dated a guy that never even existed. That puts a whole new meaning into imaginary boyfriend. So this woman was hanging out, catching up with her old pals from high school when she brought up her ex named Jeremy. But none of the friends knew who she was talking about. She dated Jeremy for 2 years and he was her high school sweetheart. They all went on group dates together and hung out a lot. But her friends were insistent that they didn't know anyone named Jeremy. The girl got upset and grabbed her yearbook to show them, but when she went through the pictures, she couldn't find Jeremy at all. So maybe she somehow went into an alternate dimension, one where Jeremy doesn't exist. In our 9th spot, we have Nelson Mandela. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Mandela effect, named after President Nelson Mandela. Well, it's said that many people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when in reality, he died in December of 2013. Paranormal researcher Fiona Broom was one of the individuals to remember Mandela dying at an earlier date. She said, and I quote, "I thought I remembered it clearly, complete with news clips of his funeral, the mourning in South Africa, some rioting in cities, and the heartfelt speech by his widow." Other people remember learning about Nelson Mandela's death in school in the 90s. It is crazy. So Nelson Mandela might have been one of those people that traveled to a different dimension. In one dimension, he died in the 1980s, and in the other, he died in 2013. Then it's somewhat believed that somehow one of these realities ended up washing over into ours, which is why some people remember him dying in the 1980s, while others say he died in 2013. In our 8th spot, we have the road trip. Posted on Reddit by the user Musical Moses, he described the time that him and his friends were transported into an alternate dimension. So him and a couple of friends were returning home from a road trip. He just got off the phone with his parents and told them that they would be home in about 25 minutes. However, as they continued driving, they rounded a corner and the road ahead of them was completely empty. There were no cars ahead or no cars behind them. He then claims that everything went black for a moment. The dashboard lights and the headlights turned off. Even the music stopped playing. Then everything went back to normal. The CD restarted from the beginning and they now could see a car ahead of them, which wasn't there a second ago. Now, the guy just shook it off, thinking that he fell asleep and woke up later on. But the other passengers in the car all experienced the same thing, even the driver. The scariest thing of all, when they arrived home, the house looked a little different. There was now a tree on the front lawn that was never there before. Not only that, but the clock revealed that they arrived home an hour later, when they were only 25 minutes away. So they lost an hour of time and don't know what happened. So they believe that they somehow ended up in an alternate dimension. And apparently it only took an hour to get there. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have the black dog. Posted on Reddit by the user T-Shopko, he believes that his entire family is now living in an alternate dimension. So it started a couple years ago when he was going through old photos at his parents' house. That's when he discovered a picture that he took of his daughter sitting in a chair eating. But in the photo, there appears to be a black dog begging his dad for some food. Here's the thing. He doesn't know whose dog that is, and none of his family members know whose dog that is. Then they found another photo. It was of their cat laying on their bed next to the same black dog. What's weird is that their cat hated dogs. It would take her a long time to warm up to them, meaning this dog must have been around for a long time. But no one recognizes it or remembers it. So theory goes that their reality has somehow changed, or their entire family somehow went to another dimension, one where they owned a black dog. In our 6th spot, we have the death. So what I've learned from these stories so far is that you'll know when you're in an alternate dimension when things around you have changed slightly. Your parents might not have buttons for eyes like in Coraline, but you'll be able to tell that things are off. So in this next story, the narrator swears that she died and came back to life in another dimension. The girl was going through a lot and tried to take her own life. All she remembers is everything going black and then seeing red and blue flashing lights. But the next morning, she woke up fine, as if nothing happened. But to this day, she knows that something isn't right about the life that she's living. Something's off. She knows for a fact that she died that night. Now, she's living in another reality. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cookies. This story was posted on Reddit by the user Dark It Soon. So a couple of weeks ago, her dad came to her house and brought her favorite cookies, which she ate in a couple days. No shame, I'd do that too. Then a couple days later, her mom brought over some more cookies and told her to try not to finish them in a couple days this time. But the cookies were some she had never seen or tried before. When she tried them, she didn't like them, which confused her mom. Her mom was insistent that they were the cookies that she always buys and loves. The girl was confused, so she called up her dad and he even confirmed it. He said that the cookies he brought her were the same kind. What the heck? So like now even cookies taste different in alternate dimensions? I don't even know. In our fourth spot we have McDonald's. Posted on Reddit by the user Ninja Nerd BGM, he shared the time that he got transported to another dimension while getting McDonald's. Some of these stories would make a great plot for a film. Maybe not this one though. So it was late at night and he decided to go out to get some McDonald's. So he took his dog with him and headed out. But on the way there, his dog got really scared and cowered under the seat. His tail was behind his legs and the hair was raised on his back. The man kept going, but when he arrived at McDonald's, he noticed that the building was very different. It was much bigger than before. Anyways, he pulled in and ordered. When he got to the window and tried to pay with his credit card, the cashier said that they don't accept cards. So he proceeded to pay with cash. Except they didn't give him back his change. Instead, they gave him a voucher with the amount they owed him on it. Pretty odd. While getting his meal, the cashier hands him the bag of food and just freezes for a second, holding the bag. Then all of a sudden the man feels a wave of electricity come over him, and just like before, his dog starts to cower under the seat. When the wave ends, he noticed that he is now in the McDonald's parking lot, not drive-thru. His food, $20, and voucher were all gone. But at least he was back at his normal McDonald's. Super weird, but at least we know that they have McDonald's in alternate dimensions. Moving on at number 3, we have the coworker. Okay, so this next story really tripped me out. So a woman was headed to her job of 8 years, but when she arrived, her coworker was not there. In her place was a man. She asked him who he was and he started laughing and said, "Come on, Tracy, you know me." Tracy was creeped out, as anyone would be. But this dude was insistent that he had been working with Tracy for 4 years. Tracy went to the back staff room and sure enough, there were pictures of this dude at the company's holiday party. Scariest part? There was even a photo of him and Tracy smiling looking at the camera. But she had no recollection of him at all. She had been working there for years with a female coworker who just suddenly disappeared. So theory goes that Tracy ended up in an alternate dimension, meaning her coworker is probably wondering where Tracy went. She's probably just as confused as Tracy. In our second spot, we have the rearrangement. This story was posted on Reddit by the user Echo Green. About 3 years ago, he was over at his friend's house helping him renovate his kitchen. 2 weeks later, he went back to his friend's house, but noticed that the setup was rearranged. The sink was where the oven was, and the oven was close to the washing machine. Side note, who on earth has their oven right next to their washer? I don't know. Anyways, he then asked his friend why he rearranged his kitchen, and he said that he didn't. That it's been like that for the longest time. But that's not all. That night he went out walking his dog at a nearby park and noticed benches along the edge of a field that had never been there before. The thing is, these benches weren't new ones, they looked pretty old. He went on with his day and found more things had been moved out of place, like trees and streetlights. So this dude is convinced that he somehow ended up in a parallel dimension. I mean, what else can explain all these items switching positions? Like, appliances and benches sure, but streetlights? Who's out there moving those? And in our number 1 spot, we have hide and seek. This next story revolves around 2 brothers playing an innocent game of hide and seek. One of the brothers, I'm gonna name him Timmy, who was 9 at the time, was hiding, while his older brother, I'm gonna name him John, was 12 at the time and he was it. So Timmy was hiding in a closet for 30 minutes before realizing that his brother probably stopped playing the game. He was annoyed and went to the living room to watch TV. Hours went by and John was nowhere to be found. He then decided to go outside and look for him, but there was still no sign of him. He went back into the house and there his brother was, sitting in his spot watching TV. John was mad and asked him where he went. John claims that he was looking for him, but ended up giving up. He called for Timmy to come out of his hiding spot, but he didn't, so he gave up and watched TV. But he was adamant that he had been sitting there watching TV just like his brother. That's freaky, like they were both at the same spot at the same time, both watching TV, yet they couldn't even see each other. Yeah, one of those brothers went to an alternate dimension somehow.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Green-Skinned Children. The Green-Skinned Children is a legend for the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England. Now the story goes that in the 12th century, these two children, a brother and a sister, suddenly appeared in this village. And as their name suggests, they had green skin. So obviously my first thought is aliens. For sure, right? Has to be. When the children were first found, they were acting all sketchy, they seemed nervous, and they were seemingly speaking gibberish. To be fair, they were discovered near a wolf pit, so that could explain the nerves, but also, they were green, so that's what we gotta talk about the most. After they were found, they were taken back to the home of Sir Richard de Callan, where he of course offered them food, water, and shelter, but they were all set. Yeah, they refused to eat. They were like, no thank you sir, trick nor treat, get out of here. The only thing they decided to eat over the next few days were green beans that they consumed straight out of the ground. Couple of green beans eating green beans, how cute. Now as the children lived with Richard over these years, he taught them how to speak, and once they had the English language down, they then told Richard that they're inhabitants of the land St. Martin, who is regarded with peculiar veneration in the country which gave us birth. That sounds like some alien shit right there. I don't even know what that means. That's like a haiku. And that they only vaguely remembered what happened before they arrived. That sure didn't help. They were with their father hearing the St. Edmund bells chiming, and then all of a sudden they were just teleported to this field in England. Early reports of parallel universes colliding? I think so.
Number 9, Schrodinger's cat. Yeah, here we go. If any of you are fans of The Big Bang Theory, then you have heard of Schrodinger's cat, which means you might know the name Erwin Schrödinger. Erwin was born in 1887 in Vienna, Austria, and his life's work in quantum mechanics revolutionized the field. And we honestly can't talk about parallel dimensions without talking about quantum mechanics. Yay. In 1926, he changed the community by developing an equation that predicted the location of electrons in an atom, and received the Nobel Prize for his work in 1933. But his most famous thought experiment was Schrodinger's cat, which he made in response to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. That interpretation states that any particle exists in all states until it is observed, so get ready for this mind-blowing thing. But Erwin countered this by describing quantum entanglement. So essentially, you put a cat in a hypothetical box. With the cat is a radioactive atom and a radiation detector that triggers the release of cyanide gas, killing the cat. The cat is blocked from interfering with either. If the detector senses any decay of the atom, it triggers the gas release. So, if the atom doesn't deteriorate, then the cat is fine. Where it gets complicated is quantum mechanics states that because the cat, the detector, and the atom are entangled, the atom rests in a superposition of both deteriorating and not. Without measurement being taken, both realities exist until you open the box. But because we as humans are also made of matter that obeys the laws of quantum mechanics, when we open the box, we experience both of these realities but in two separate worlds. Hence, multiple dimensions.
Number 8, the Count of Saint Germain. This next one here, this is why you don't, slap the Lord. Here's some advice. The Count of Saint Germain. Records have it that this man was born in the late 1600s, but rumor has it this is really Cartaphilus, the man who slapped Jesus while he was on his way to crucifixion. So he was on his way to his end and he's like, get out of here. Subsequently, he was cursed with immortality to atone for this sin. Over his long life, he's picked up many tricks and talents, taking on many different identities in the process. He also popped up in history a few times, but he's always the same age. He's always around 45 years old. He was known by other famous people as well. These reports weren't just passerbyers, they were people like Casanova or Madame Pompadour. So many accounts say he was born around the 1600s to the Prince of Transylvania back in 1690. But one of the most popular myths was of course that this man was alive when Jesus was turning water into wine. This guy sounds like Loki in disguise here on Earth. I don't know, I'm getting suspicious. His skill in alchemy sure supports the theory. And that's where the immortal theory also comes into play. He was trying to create what's called projection powder, and by using the Philosopher's Stone, yep, Spelliarmus for you, he could create an immortality elixir. Nice. Welcome to Hogwarts. This stone will make you immortal. Don't slap Jesus, break a leg.
Number 7, the Antarctica experiment. I've done so many parallel universe videos by now. Man, but I've basically given myself a crash course on quantum mechanics, though I'm nothing close to it, guys. Seriously. So bad at science. Anyways, the pursuit of multi-dimensional travel is ongoing, and we never know when we might crack it. And for one moment, One moment, scientists thought we did. For the Antarctic experiment, scientists set up ANITA, the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, aka a fancy hot air balloon for science. It was designed to study ultra-high energy by detecting radio pulses emitted by their interactions with the Antarctic ice sheet. They wanted it to get high enough to detect neutrino particles coming down from space, which it did, but then they picked up 2 signals of particles coming up from the Earth. This implied that they were going back in time since they were going the opposite way. Therefore, scientists hypothesized that these particles were a part of a parallel universe going backwards in time. This study fell under a whole bunch of scrutiny, and many scientists deny that this is a concrete evidence that it was just a fluke, but you know, it's still there and they're still waiting. We know parallel universes are a real thing. We're just waiting still.
Number 6. Caspar Hauser. Another commute through dimensions means another young boy just appearing in a town. We love those, not stressful at all. May 26, 1828, the fine folks of Nuremberg, Germany found Caspar just walking aimlessly around town. He was in his teens and his clothes were all tattered up and he kept repeating the same line over and over, which is concerning. He kept repeating the fact that his father was a cavalry officer and that he hoped that he was okay. Of course he was taken to the police after this to see what's going on. He wrote his name down as Caspar Hauser, and as he got older he was able to share more details on this strange origin. He was apparently held captive when he was really young in a cell from this unknown person, but they fed him and gave him water, even toys to help pass the time. So this is pretty concerning. What a terrible origin this is. Now obviously they were going to send this kid back on his merry way, so the schoolmaster, George Dahmer, he adopted him. At first this kid couldn't read or write really at all, but only after just a few weeks he was extraordinarily good at both. Everybody in the town was also shocked. This mysterious boy, just even more mysterious now. Was he just lying to seem like a smarty pants, or was this kid from another dimension and you just didn't realize it? Sound off in the comments below.
Number 5, Jofar Vorin. I know there have been a couple points throughout history where humanity has thought that they've discovered everything on Earth and then like, whoa! Someone new shows up and it's a whole thing and it's kind of crazy and we have some really rough history with that stuff. I'm pretty confident though by now with Google Maps and astronauts in space that we know where all the countries are. In this dimension at least. Because then there are cases like Jofar Vorin. Vorin spoke some kind of strange version of Germanic language and claimed to be from a place called Sacria. He said that Sacria was part of an entirely different continent separated by a massive expanse of water, and it was vastly different. He said that they had a Christian-like religion but had many differences. He got lost during a storm and his ship was destroyed, but the thing was, he looked on the map of the world and he couldn't find his home. Perhaps that's because his world exists in an entirely different dimension, but I guess we will never know until we visit it one day.
Number 4, the man from Torrid. You ever see your friend's fake ID and you're like, yeah, that's not gonna work, we're going home for sure. The man from Torrid has us all beat. Okay, back in 1954, this sharp-dressed man arrived in Haneda Airport, Tokyo, Japan. What followed wasn't anything out of the ordinary though. He made his way through customs alongside other passengers that day, but when the questions began to roll in, his answers were pretty fishy. He says he was coming from Torrid and that this was his 3rd time visiting Japan. He was this Caucasian dude with a beard who also sounded French, so already this was just a sight to see at customs. This country doesn't exist, obviously, so they pulled out a map and they're like, hey, point to where you're from, help us help you. Mr. French Beard Boy all of a sudden pointed to the border of France and Spain, saying that the country has been in existence for over 1,000 years. And they're looking at it like, no, it's not. He was actually confused why it said Andorra instead of Torrid. He was like, oh, is this an old map? No, you're from a different universe, get out of here. He had with him currency belonging to numerous countries, being a business guy and all, with a beardy boy. So they had him at this hotel until they could figure out what was going on. They had a tight watch on the hotel obviously as well, but overnight, he vanished. He was just gone. 2 guards watching the door didn't see or hear a thing. The last we saw of him was up high in a hotel, Sans balcony. Sounds like he figured out a way back to his own dimension where he can comfortably return to his home of the non-existent Torrid, where they watch hockey and have beards and drink beer, be French, you know.
Number 3, Mandela effects. If Mandela effects aren't proof that parallel universes split every second of every day, then call me crazy. Put me in a rubber room. I'll probably have a good time. The Mandela effect is a weird phenomenon where a mass amount of people remember the same things but differently and incorrectly. Doctors believe that this is simply a case of how poor memory can be, that we all just have really bad memories. Like, I mean, to be fair, I don't remember what I had for breakfast like 2 days ago. That's pretty bad. But it was coined after a massive group of people remembered Nelson Mandela died while in prison in the 1980s, while he actually lived until 2013. Weird. Here are a couple more examples. Everyone remembers the Berenstain Bears were spelled with the E-I-N, but it's actually always been the Berenstain Bears. Second, Looney Tunes versus Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes spelled T-O-O-N-S, but it's actually spelled T-U-N-E-S, like iTunes. And recently, the one that blew my mind was the movie Shazam, where Sinbad played the genie. It doesn't exist! It doesn't exist! But there's pictures of him! Kazam does with Shaquille O'Neal, but I just don't understand. This bothers me so much. It is the one that plagues my mind. I wake up and it's the reason I have to drink coffee.
Number 2, the Philadelphia experiment. Perhaps one of the most unnerving urban legends of all has to be the 1943 Philadelphia experiment. This World War II conspiracy theory takes place on the USS Eldridge, this destroyer-class ship, and they were conducting these experiments in order to gain power over naval warfare at the time. One of these experiments was to create this technology that makes the ship invisible on radar. That's an important note. On radar, it would be invisible. It's not the Wonder Woman jet, it doesn't just go blink and then they're gone. But when the generators were finally fired up, the hull apparently lit up with this green and blue light, and then the ship actually disappeared. It was gone. It was seen next at the naval shipyard in Virginia before the same thing happened again, then it appeared back in Philadelphia. This sounds intense as is, but when you hear about the crew that was on board at the time, it only gets worse. Some went mad after the dimensional dip, while others had body parts fused to the ship. Imagine finding your crewmate's arm in your pantry. You're like, Phil? It's Phil's arm! Oh my god, I thought he was off today. It's nuts.
We're back at number 1 with the Higgs boson, or just CERN. CERN in general. CERN has a lot of interesting experiments happening behind those tightly closed doors. It would be any physicist's dream to work there, I'm sure. But what it is most famous for at the moment is the Large Hadron Collider, which discovered a revolutionary new particle called the Higgs boson, aka the God particle. The existence of the Higgs boson was first proposed in 1964 by Peter Higgs and Francois Englert. It is a particle that is associated with the Higgs field, a field that gives mass to other fundamental particles. I don't quite understand this, but essentially it's like what allows us to understand how things gain mass. This is a massive discovery and a terrifying one. According to the late Stephen Hawking, the Higgs boson could destroy the universe by triggering, and I quote, a catastrophic vacuum decay which would cause space and time to collapse and we would not have any warning to the dangers. Unquote. Not scary at all. But that's not the only thing that the LHC could do. When CERN first opened, Sergio Bertolucci did say that the LHC has the potential of opening up doors to other worlds for a, and I quote, very tiny lapse of time. Just enough time to send something through before it's shut again. The fact that scientists have so much faith in this machine proves that they have enough evidence at least to believe different dimensions exist. I just hope their experiments don't stop all of time itself, but I guess I wouldn't know if it had.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the fourth dimension. Fourth dimension, okay, let's talk about the first 3 for a hot minute and then we can break our brains and wrap it up. First dimension, the x-axis, aka length, aka these arms. Quite long, one-dimensional in your screen, you got it, great, awesome. Second dimension, y-axis, aka height. I'm 6'2", long arms, now I'm a 3D real person in your 2D screen. Got it, sweet. Already this is nuts. The third dimension is juicy. This is where we have to start leaning in and raising our eyebrows. The z-axis gives these objects a sense of area and cross-section like a cube. It's got length, width, and volume, all that jazz. It's the real deal at every angle. The fourth dimension, scientists believe, is time. Time is like a highway for everything. If we can navigate time and potentially go backwards, well, you know what's up. You've seen all those movies. But according to superstring theory, once we start messing with time, you start to bring in possible other worlds. Alternate worlds, alternate realities. Those sound terrifying. I've seen movies, hard pass. Wake up one day and then spaghetti just doesn't exist. That's a nightmare. Put me back.
In our number 9 spot today we have Xibalba. Also referred to as the place of fright, this underworld comes from Mayan mythology. Overseen of course by the Maya death gods, Xibalba came to be in the 16th century Verapaz. The entrance to such a wonderful place was in a cave in Guatemala. Caves in Belize are actually known as the entrance to Xibalba. These water-filled caves spanning as far as 300 feet were the front door. But you can't just grab a snorkel and frog kick your way to the underworld. According to ancient Maya scripture, this path was once filled with dark obstacles, and I mean some pretty awful obstacles. A river filled with scorpions and blood, combined with houses littered with bats and pure darkness. Honestly, I would rather the bats than a river of blood. 10 times out of 10.
Number 8. Niflheimer. Ah yes, Norse mythology. We've probably heard about this dark dimension at some point in time, but Niflheimer is one of the 9 realms. This realm is specific for the dishonored, as its ruler is that of Hel, the daughter of Loki. Superhero movies are fun and all, but Thor stuff always hits a little harder because it's based on this Norse legend. Hel in this realm is not as fun as Cate Blanchett also. This historical version was described as having half her body alive and the other half a rotten corpse, and I don't want to know which side is which, to be honest. It's like a mermaid, but just all bad. You end up here if you pass away in your sleep or if you pass in an otherwise cowardly fashion. Which, side note, that would suck. You pass peacefully in your sleep with ongoing medical conditions, then you wake up here with Hel and her dragon pet named Nadog. What a mess. I'd rather have a night terror. Bye.
In our number 7 spot today we have Duzak. This realm is like the equivalent of hell in Zoroastrianism. In this religion there are many fates for those who are wicked, which include things like annihilation, purgation in molten metal, and none other than good old eternal punishment. In the Zoroastrian religion, Duzak is a place where evil souls will remain for quite some time. There are actually a few different versions of hell in this religion that all hold places for different things. One place is for evil thoughts, one is for evil words, and one is for evil people. It is said that these versions of hell smell really bad, which is kind of hilarious. They're like, you're gonna suffer, but the worst part is the smell. Apparently in some of these hellish places, it's so dark that if you find yourself there, you will think that you have lost your eyesight.
Number 6. The Egyptian Afterlife. Otherwise known as the Fields of Reeds or Fields of Offering, this is a place ancient Egyptians believed came after life. In fact, they believed that life on earth was only a mere fraction of an eternal life. Not ending in death, but rather forever lasting in peace and harmony. Doesn't that sound wonderful, Chris? Wow. They believed there was more than the body to just failing. The soul must go on after this point. Born on earth believing in the gods and the deities known as the Seven Hathors, once death did arrive, you're just entering another realm, but hopefully the gods have judged you, so now you can live in this paradise known as the Fields of Reed. The thing is, you don't just pass on and enter this realm where you can drink wine and then two-step with your relatives. You have to earn that spot. You gotta know the bouncer or pay cover. You're not just waltzing in here. This paradise is just a mirror image of your previous mortal life. So if you're not kind to others, this field of dreams can easily turn into a field of eternal nightmares. Sweet. Ancient Egyptians' beliefs in hell predates that of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic visions. The concept of hell in ancient Egypt predates the concept of hell in those modern religions. With the god Osiris believed to be the lord of said underworld, we have the coffin text and the Book of the Dead to study up while we're still living, like us, lousy mortals.
In our number 5 spot today we have the Upside Down. Hold on, Stranger Things fans, because you know exactly where we are going. The Upside Down is an alternate dimension that exists parallel to the human world. Basically, every living thing that exists in the Upside Down are all linked together in a sort of hive mind situation, and they are all controlled by the Mind Flayer. It is here, in the Upside Down, where the species of humanoid predators were born, the Demogorgons. It isn't exactly clear how this dimension came to be, but it is thought that the origins of it also relate back to the Mind Flayer. Who is the Mind Flayer other than the entity who rules the evil parallel dimension? Well, he is an extremely powerful being who is on a conquest to take over the world. He has been known to do things like fry humans and rats, feeding them chemicals and melting their bodies into a pile of biomass, which would then be used to create a new body for itself to then take over the world. Yeah, I don't want to go to this guy's house for coffee, let alone live in his weird evil world. Hard pass on that one.
Number 4. Tartarus. For this next one, we're dipping into the Greek underworld. According to Greek mythology, I'm talking way back in 1700 BC, Tartarus was a deep abyss, a dungeon really, full of torture and suffering. Lovely. This place full of suffering of course resides in Hades. Hades is a realm where the dead go after their time. It doesn't mean that it's a fiery abyss per se, but that's where Tartarus comes into play. That's where the underworld devil theme, fire and hell stuff, that's where it kicks in. In the Gorgias, Plato wrote about these souls of the dead and how they were judged after they had crossed the river of the dead. Now if you weren't a great human being, you of course were judged as so, and subsequently you were sent to Tartarus. In Greek poet Hesiod's Theogony, Tartarus was an offspring of Aether and Gaia. It was a person, a real thing. They were the third of the primordial deities. Even Zeus mentioned this place in the Iliad. Zeus states that the Tartarus is far beneath Hades as heaven is high above earth. Hashtag facts. You heard it from Zeus himself.
In our number 3 spot today we have Naraka. Naraka is the hell that exists within Jain cosmology. It is the realm of existence that holds great suffering, but it's different from some of the other hells as we know them. Part of this difference stems from the fact that you don't go here as a result of divine judgment and punishment, but rather as a direct result of one's previous karma. Another reason why it differs is because of the fact that one's stay here isn't for all of eternity. It's still a super long time, as it's usually measured in billions of years, but I guess a super long time is slightly better than forever? It would kind of suck to have to move after a billion years though. At that point, I feel like you'd have probably made a nice little cozy spot for yourself. Anyway, the length of your time here is dependent on when the karma has been rebalanced.
Number 2. DU. According to Chinese mythology, DU has been described as a literal maze. Influenced by Buddhism, the 10 courts of hell are actually pretty loaded when it comes to accommodation. The Jade Emperor originally put Yama in charge of watching over DU. Now DU is where the souls go right after death initially, but it's not where they're held. It's not like a dark realm per se, but it is home to 12,800 hells right below Earth. So there's more than one. There's 8 dark hells, 8 cold hells, and 84,000 other hells at the end of the universe. It depends how long you stay in DU, of course, depending on what sin you've committed, but like I said, it's an actual maze. Each level of this dark realm corresponds to different sins. For example, if you were a gossiping Gale, in DU you would have your tongue torn out. Infidelity, well, say goodbye to your fingers. And if you took somebody else's life, a spot for you is reserved specifically on the mountain made of knives, which is not a comfortable sleep if you didn't put that together.
In our number 1 spot today we have hell. We have of course got to talk about the classic Christian interpretation of hell. Old Faithful, one might call it. No one's calling it that, but anyway, the Christian fiery underworld is full of the suffocating smell of brimstone and demons that have a hierarchy and an answer to Satan himself. There are rivers of fire or scalding water, a ton of snakes, and just general bad vibes. Truly, it just sucks, and it's apparently super hot down there. The worst part? It's not particularly difficult to get here, if it really does exist. In fact, if this version of hell actually exists and you gotta play by the Christian rules in order to stay away, most of us here right now are probably gonna see each other there. The next worst part? This is one evil place that once you're in, you're not getting out.